Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And today, considering the fact that some weeks ago I watched the satirical slasher comedy Spree that centered around what do they call? I suppose an app-based driver who becomes a spree killer, with obviously the layers of commentary and discussion about the modern sort of the ways that technology is changing people and the social media aspect of it, how it's changing our perceptions of horror and sort of social commentary horror. I thought today I would flip it and look at, I suppose, in broad strokes, let's say Spree is the male side of that experience, whereas Cam allows me to sort of explore the female side of that experience. Now that's very broad strokes principles. It's not quite accurate, but it's a way for me to transition, I suppose, and to link the two. Because, we are in an age now where the cam girl is a sort of common phenomenon. I mean, I've had several conversations with a variety of different people about OnlyFans, and the fact that many young women are now are very willing to participate in OnlyFans, and the positives and negatives of that process, I suppose. Because, I mean, cam is a really interesting idea of it's a very modern perception of I suppose sexuality, commodification of self, and the idea of the personal and the professional bleeding into one in a way that's very relevant to how our consciousness is changing within an age where we are all putting ourselves on cameras and essentially selling ourselves. Here I am. So it follows. She has two names: Alice in the real world, or Lola, which is her cam name, played by Madeline Brewer, and she is a cam girl. That is a girl who goes on camera on webcam and will participate in acts suggested by men who pay over the internet. Within the band of her comfort. So sometimes she'll do something as silly as eat cake, to the other end where she will do fairly sexual acts on camera, all for all for financial gain. And I suppose the first thing I quite like about the film is it's not judgmental about it. It's presenting the concerns from the perspective of a young woman putting herself on the internet in that way, and the dangers of it from that perspective. But it has no real judgment on the sex work aspect of it. It's not supposed to be a criticism of sex work. We are in an age now where I listen to several podcasts and watch videos that are discussing, or presenting the question of modern sex work and sex work as a whole, and the fact that we are getting further and further away from draconian ideas of that shouldn't exist, and we're in the age now where if a person is willing to do that, and that's something that they feel comfortable with, and will and that's a way that they want to make money, then there are worse ways to make money. And so you have that sort of sense of modern acceptance of it. But as I say, this is an examination of the dangers of that world, I suppose, and the psychological ramifications of that world. I mean, this is, at its core, a horror. And as a horror, it obviously wants to, exploit and present the fears that people have in the modern age. I mean, I remember there was a period where we were concerned in the sort of horror film conversations about whether we were ever going to get over the hurdle of horror, of fantastical horror in the modern age, and whether those two things would be compatible. And it became that question of, if someone is able to make a mobile phone call from anywhere, or jump on a live stream, or find a way to get attention to themselves, can we have the same attitudes to horror? And I don't mean just practicality in practical terms, in terms of if you capture a ghost on camera, etc., etc. But more the idea of horror, when you strip away the facade, is more about things like isolation, paranoia, self-consumption, self-destructiveness, fear of the unknown or fear of the known, and the concern was briefly existed over whether in the modern age we were going to really need to re-examine how that kind of story could be told. And as I've said before, to its credit, Paranormal Activity, the original film, and being a little bit snobbish about it, the festival cut of the original film, really found a way to capture that. And from then onwards, we've seen the evolution of horror in the sort of digital age. If anything, now that we've reached this point of social media presentation, of people being in little boxes on camera in an endless sea of people, those ideas are starting to find a new face within the modern age, and therefore horror as a genre is finding a new way to represent those ideas. Of course, I've talked previously about things like the webcam horror film, films like Host, or Unfriended, have really started to sort of explore ways in which we are more isolated now than we would be, in the old horror films. You'd have to take someone to the woods or have them be alone at home, whereas now, the idea that we're alone because our friendships are all online, it really recontextualizes the way that horror can be presented. And what I credit Cam with is the idea of, our main girl is enjoys her job. She is good at it, and as I say, it doesn't represent cam girls and that world as being horrific, and she's not being punished for being that. However, it presents the idea that like as I said at the beginning, the commodification of self. Like with Spree, the idea that not only is she online presenting herself to people who she can't see, what are essentially text boxes, or sometimes people at the other end of a webcam, but there's a point where it becomes competitive, and she's ranked, and of course she makes more money if she can climb the rankings, because she gets more prestige and more attention, and so therefore more people going onto her channel, and of course then contributing money to her. And therefore you see at the beginning the extreme lengths she's already going to get that attention. She sort of fakes a suicide, which is quite a shocking way, especially not knowing that's going to happen, and you're thinking, is this going to be a Scream type film where we're given this girl, she escalates where all of these people on camera are telling her to stab herself, and she does, but it's all been staged, that she actually had a plant amongst those people whose job it was to sort of excite them into a frenzy and allow her to stage this because it gets her attention. And immediately you think that's a dangerous precedent to set. And you see the community that she lives in with Kangirl. It's not like she is in isolation entirely. She sees other cam girls, she speaks to them, she even meets up and does shows, I suppose you call them, with, so there is, in that same way, I suppose, as with strippers, there is still a community of women who are sharing the experience, but there is still that sense of isolation. And what's worse is, and I suppose this is the core commentary of it, is that camgirling is not like other forms of sex work in regards to the fact that there was always a sense of personal and professional, at least in the representation in media. In the real world, I used to say, but it always was represented very much in. If you think back to something like Secret Diary of a Call Girl, the idea that there was two characters, your girl as she presents herself as a sex worker, and the girl as she presents herself in her personal life, and those two worlds. Her struggle is to keep those two worlds separate. However, with Alice Lola, these two things blur, because as a cam girl, one, she's being filmed in her own home, and two, it is not like she's doing a performance. It's more like she's just doing things as herself, but in a way that makes her clients, her customers, feel like they're getting to know her, and of course that creates its own host of problems, where she has troublesome clients who are overly familiar with her. But again, she blurs deeply that line between the personal and the professional, even to the point where her younger brother knows this is a job she does, and it's something that she wants to talk to her mum about, but hasn't quite mustered the courage to yet. And that's where the danger comes in, because all of a sudden, when the event happens where somebody who looks exactly like her starts to perform in the same way that she does with her identity, it becomes very much like the Russian play and book that's been recreated. That doppelganger sense of this character exists that is her in every possible sense on camera, taking her clients and her money, and she can't get into her own account because this person is essentially stolen her identity and is performing and is doing it almost better because it seems to be all they are. And once she loses that identity, and as I say, because the professional and the personal are blurred, it is as though she is losing her identity as a whole. There's this very in theatre circles, there is a famous play called Krapp's Last Tape, and Krapp's Last Tape is about a man who every year records himself on his birthday, and it's a series of monologues. And the commentary about Krapp's Last Tape is the idea of a man who is entirely consumed by the machine, and it's sort of the progenitor of the dramas about machines consuming people in ways that we couldn't possibly anticipate. And this is exactly that, because it is about the fact that this girl, has literally been consumed or replicated in some way. And I won't spoil exactly what way, but there is this character that is her, and it's better than her, and is getting better clicks and is raising up on the rankings, whereas she diminishes and her life slowly falls apart because of it. And that's a really interesting commentary. And there is this, you could watch this with sort of a quite a gross eye to it, going, "Oh, this is a film about a cam girl." But frankly, this film really leans into this sort of empathy factor, and that makes the horror all the more interesting, because this film just has this sense of anxiety from the beginning. Even when there is no external threat, you can feel the delicacy of her mind, and she's so desperate to, raise her ranking, get the right attention, make the money, and the ways, the lengths in which she is willing to go, at least to the end of the first act, that are even before the threat comes. There is this sense of self-harm, this danger that she is bringing upon herself. And then when that happens and she is being replaced, the sort of the fragility of her mind and the anxiety as her personal life starts to unravel. And it's such a good film in that respect. It's such an interesting deep dive, and just like Spree, it explores the ways in which our world is changing in that respect. It's a very post Black Mirror narrative, which is funny because Madeline Brewer was in a Black Mirror episode, but and the ways in which we are re-examining horror, science fiction, the psychological through technology, and how that sort of, the new ways that we can be afraid or concerned or have anxiety over these kinds of stories. And I think in terms of horror, that's fascinating, and it's a really interesting direction to go in. I think this is a really good film. It's a great character piece. It's got a lot going on. I think it's probably, in my perspective, a little better than Spree. Whereas Spree wants to obviously lean into the dark comedy aspects of it, this is much more of a psychological experience, and for me that's much more interesting. And of course it doesn't shy away from some of the other horror aspects of it. But this is a genuinely fantastic film, and worth watching and delving into Netflix for, because like many good horrors, it can easily just disappear into the ether. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because it's all helping the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 200 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows, films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.